Hey, this is Rich O'Neill with Elite Functional Performance here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And for our friends at Charlotte Country Day School, this is going to be your total body workout number 2. So very much like exercise video 1, we're going to take you through some movements that are going to have the bands set up at various heights. And some of these movements will look similar to exercises that we performed in the first video, but we put a little bit of a different spin on it for variation. We're going to be using our continuous band at 3 different positions today: at the ankles, at the knees with the work being done on the floor, and at the knees in a standing position. So for the first movement in our high band attachment point, we're going to work into a high to low chop. So I'll be standing sideways to my anchor here. My feet are in a standard squat width distance. I'm going to grab both handles with both hands across my body, and I'll begin squatting down as I chop my hands from a high angle over my inside shoulder down to the outside of my knee and back up with control. So rather than have the knee collapse in as we chop, we'll be focusing on leaving the knee in the static squat position and just rotating the upper body and torso down as we chop. We'll perform 8 reps on each side. So we'll switch to the opposite side. Switch our hand grip so the inside hand is holding both handles and the outside hand grabs on top. If it feels comfortable, you can follow your hands with your eyes to make sure we get full completion of every rotation through the high-low action. Finish 8 reps and rest. Okay, so for our next movement, I'm going to grab both handles with my right hand. I'll step back here. Because I'm holding with my right arm, I'll take my right foot and put it back into a lunge position. I'll raise my chin to be looking into my anchor. I will drop down into a lunge as I pull my arm down toward my armpit. Come back up with control. Drop down and pull. We call this one our stationary lunge pull. As you can see, my legs are remaining stationary in a lunge stance, and I'm just moving up and down, in and out of that lunge with the pull. Control is important here, as we can't let that band kind of yank us forward on the way up. So we focus on keeping the core tight to maintain an upright spine throughout the movement. When we finish 8 reps, we'll switch. Left hand grab, left leg back. Get to where my core is turned on and my spine is tight. And then I'll drop down into the lunge and pull. And we'll perform 8 consecutive repetitions on the opposite side. So for the next one, I'm going to grab my handles, turn my arms overhead, and face out. I'll place one foot out in front to create a stable position. My upper arm is at 90 degrees to my upper body, and both hands are in tight against the side of my skull. In exercise video number 1, we performed a movement where both arms are coming out together. To give a little bit more variety and to increase the tempo a little bit, this exercise is going to move one arm at a time in a locomotion fashion, a little bit higher tempo. And we're gonna move back and forth till we hit 20 repetitions. 1, 2, 3, 4, counting straight through to 20, And try not to let the body get too jerky or too out of control with the elastic. So you'll feel the core having to stay consistently active throughout to keep the body from moving back and forth, as well as side to side. So for our next sequence, we've moved our anchor point down to our mid-level. Mid-level is gonna be somewhere between about bottom of the rib cage, top of the hip. Somewhere in that region will be appropriate for the next level down. So here we're gonna grab both of our handles. Start with my feet together, shoulders back, in a neutral hand grip. I'm gonna step back into a lunge with my right leg as I pull both hands alongside my rib cage. I'll return to starting position as my arms straighten, and then alternate my feet on the step back, completing a pull with every rep. Alternating the feet, and focusing on keeping an upright spine at bottom position rather than leaning forward. We're remembering to squeeze our shoulders back and bring your shoulder blades close to your spine at the end of each pull. We'll perform 8 on each side with controlled breathing. So for our next movement, we're now facing away from the anchor point. We're going to step forward and begin with both feet together. We're gonna step forward with the right leg as I punch with the left arm. I'll return to starting position, step out with my left foot as I punch with my right arm. Now when we work with this left arm, right leg, right arm, left leg pattern, this is known as a contralateral pattern. So this is a little bit different than the exercise in video 1, where we were stepping out with both arms punching and alternating your feet. Here now, we'll be stepping with the right and punching with the left. Return to starting position, and then switching to the opposite side. We'll perform 8 on each side, moving in that back and forth, alternating pattern, keeping an upright spine throughout. For our next one, we're gonna work what I call a punch squat punch. So I'll step out, set my feet up about hip width. I'll begin from a soft squat position, about halfway down into full depth squat. Now when I come out of this squat and I begin to punch, I'm gonna rotate my body to my left. I'll return to starting position, come back down into that mini squat, change direction, punch out, twist to the right. So I come back to the middle on every rep and reset to a soft squat before I punch out in the opposite direction. So now here we begin getting into a little bit of a tempo pattern. Squat, punch, squat, punch, thinking about getting more full body rotation here. So now we're taking the hips and the torso side to side, always coming back to the center to reset before we change direction. We'll perform 20 repetitions in a row, moving back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, straight through to 20. So we're at our low attachment point here. Our low attachment will be somewhere about mid-shin level, maybe at the top of the sock line, about 6 inches below the kneecap. So for our next movement, we're gonna be facing away from our anchor point. We'll set our feet up in squat position. We'll begin from a squat, and from here, I'll come up out of my squat and push overhead up across the body. Come back down, reset to a squat, come up, change opposite direction. Overhead, squat, push overhead and reach. That reach will give you a nice stretch through the armpit and the rib cage. Making sure to come down with control, reset in the middle before changing direction. So our first exercise with our low attachment site will be our squat to pull. I'll grab both handles with both hands, step my feet back to a squat stance. I'll drive the weight back into my heels as I descend, and then as I stand, I'll pull my hands alongside my rib cage, squeezing shoulder blades back together before descending into the next squat and allowing my arms to straighten at the bottom. Inhale when I stand up to pull. Exhale as we drop down into the next squat. We'll perform 10 of these, making sure to squeeze the shoulder blades together at the back and making sure to keep the heels down as the squat gets deeper. So for our next exercise at our low attachment site, we're gonna work on some balance. We're gonna particularly work single leg balance loaded to the opposite side. So I'll grab both handles in my right hand. I'll step back and begin by standing on my left foot. Now here I wanna make sure that I line my toe on my standing leg up to the anchor point so I'm not off center for my balance. I'll begin by letting my body come forward a little bit. And then as I stand up, I'll pull and bring my knee up to 90 degrees to my hip. Down with control, up to a pull. We'll be focusing on keeping the core tight to maintain stability and balance. We'll perform 8 repetitions with control before switching. Then I'll switch to the opposite side. So I'll grab both handles in my left hand, line my right foot up, tight stomach, opposite hand to the hip, squat down, stand up to pull, bring the knee to 90 degrees, slow control out for 8 reps. Okay, so here we've got your continuous elastic loop. We're gonna place this around the ankles. And so here we'll begin with some support. Here I've got a stick. This could be a broomstick, a shower curtain rod. If we're nearby a staircase, we can grab onto a handrail or a banister, or even a kitchen top or countertop in the kitchen. I'll place the stick off to the side so I can lean a little bit toward that stick as I take my opposite leg out to the side. Now we call this exercise eccentric abduction. And what we mean by that is I'm going to move my leg into abduction and then control the eccentric portion of the exercise. meaning once I get the band to full extension, I don't want it to snap my leg back down, but rather I want to control the way back in. So there will be a forceful tempo out, a 1 second hold, and then we'll come back with control. Slow tempo, back to starting position. Now we're gonna work 30 seconds on each leg. We'll get that leg out, squeeze, slow control back down. Okay, our next movement with the continuous band around the ankles will have us with the hands out in front. We'll come down into a soft squat position. We're gonna step out to the side for 2 steps and then back for 2 steps. Back and forth. The objective is to try and keep the toes pointing forward and not let the foot lead out to the side. We'll move through 30 seconds, continuous repetition, tap, tap, side to side. Okay, next we'll be down on the floor. We're gonna take the band from the ankles and bring it up over the knees. Once the band is in a comfortable position, we'll get ourselves positioned onto the spine. Palms are up, facing the ceiling. Shoulder blades are down on the floor, and the lower back will squeeze and make contact with the ground. Once I'm locked into position, I'll push through my heels and elevate my hips into bridge position. Once I feel like I've got that position locked into place, I'm then ready to begin my march. I'll take one knee up toward my chest, back down with control, alternating, back and forth, keeping the butt off the floor the whole time. We're gonna work this for 30 seconds of continuous movement. If we need to pause to reset the position of the band, that's fine. We'll come back up into bridge and continue. Okay, so next we're gonna be on our side. Our side lying position has the elbow on the floor in a straight line with the shoulder. We don't wanna have the arm too far out, so I just make sure that if I look down from my shoulder, I see my elbow in a straight line. My knees will be at 90 degrees to my upper body. Other hand can go on my hip. My feet are stacked up. I'm going to peel the top knee away from the bottom knee. Control with the 1 count, and then come back down slowly. So an inhale up, 1 count hold, slow control down. We'll perform 30 straight seconds. We're trying to keep the feet stacked up here, so as the leg comes up, the feet don't separate. Try to keep the feet on top of one another throughout. So when you finish 30 seconds in this direction, we'll switch over to the other side. Get the elbow and shoulder aligned, set the legs up, and then begin 30 seconds on the opposite side. Pull the knee off, 1 second hold, down with slow control. For the next one, we'll have the band around the knees and we'll be standing. The first exercise, we're gonna come down into our half chair position. Arms will be folded in front and the feet are at hip width distance. I'm gonna begin by rotating my foot to the inside, making the band have a little bit more slack. And then I'm just gonna twist to the outside, lengthening the band and working into that hip. We're gonna stay on that side for 30 seconds, and we'll feel the work in the hip of the leg that's twisting. We call this one squash the bug. It's like there's a bug on the floor, and we're just winding the foot inside, outside for 30 seconds. And we'll put that foot on the floor, wind that side in. So this movement is going to work on mobilizing the hip by rotating the ball from the exterior to the interior of the socket, but we'll also feel the muscles around the hip and in the glutes begin to strengthen as well. So we're working on hip strength and hip mobility with this movement. So when we're making our rotation, internal or external, we're thinking about keeping the foot pressure through the front of the shoe. Another important piece with this movement is when I'm in that squat and I'm rotating, I'm trying to have some discipline with the upper body. So I want to make sure that the shoulders stay back and I'm really just working out of that hip, not allowing the shoulder to dip forward and then come back. We want to minimize the amount of total body activity and try to isolate just in the hip. So our next movement with the band around the knees will be a body weight squat. So we'll set our feet up, hip width or slightly wider. We'll drop down into a squat as we apply some pressure on the band through the descent, returning back to starting position. We can keep the hands in front of the body. We can even reach the arms out in front of the body. The idea with this is to keep the weight in the heels and the hips moving behind as you descend. So with the squat, we often hear about the importance of knees staying behind the toes as we descend. And this is obviously very important because we want to take away the amount of force that's coming into the knee as we begin to bring our body lower to the floor. Some movement forward with the knee is acceptable, especially in an exercise like this where we're using body weight and there's no influence from external load. So we can let the knees come forward a little bit as we drop down into our squat, as long as we don't have an excessive forward action that may lift the heel. Heels remaining on the ground is critical. Also remembering to put some pressure on the band as we move the hands, as we move the knees out with every rep. So thanks for tuning in for our exercise session, and be on the lookout for more videos coming in this series.